Welcome to BCO Sundays at 3. This is the third Jonathan Palevsky Informance of our reconstructed Beethoven Symphony featuring Baltimore Chamber Orchestra performances. We have heard the first movement of Symphony No. 3, Eroica, and then the second movement of the Pastoral Symphony, and today we consider the third movement of Symphony No. 7. The symphony, as established by Haydn and Mozart, has 4 movements: a quick first movement, a slow second movement, a dance movement in a triple meter, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and a rousing finale. Beethoven's 4-movement symphonies followed this same pattern, but his third movements were faster, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And most of them he called scherzos. Scherzos is Italian for joke, and there are always jokes in Beethoven's scherzos. In most of the scherzos, the joke was the size of the smollett unit. Is it 2 or 3? 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. My favorite example is the scherzo of the Eroica Symphony. Ultimately, he reveals the movement to have 3 beats to the bar, but it starts this way. The third movement of the 7th Symphony isn't called a scherzo, but it does present a joke of a different kind, moving between very loud and suddenly very soft, or very soft and suddenly very loud. It starts forte, loud, and after 2 bars, subito piano, suddenly soft. And sometimes it goes the other way. In this case, pianissimo, very soft, to fortissimo, very loud. Dance movements in the symphony are really just updated dance movements from the Baroque era. They were short and often consisted of one dance followed by a second, similar one, and then by a repeat of the first. In the expanded symphonic movement dance forms, that second dance is usually of a contrasting character. The third movement of the 7th Symphony takes this one step further, contrasting the opening fast Presto with a stately Austrian pilgrim's hymn tune. Somewhat unorthodox, this movement expands the form to fast, slow again, and ending with a fast pop. Now, here's the one and only, the incomparable Jonathan Palevsky.
Bonjour, mes petits amis. It's so nice to be with you again, and thank you, Markand Thakar, for that lovely introduction. It is my pleasure to talk about the 7th Symphony of Beethoven and the third movement, a little bit of Beethoven. Where has Beethoven been all of these years since the 6th and the 7th Symphony? Well, he's been busy. He's at the end of his heroic period, but there's no symphony between 1808 and 1811. Beethoven's writing other things. So this is his first symphony in almost 4 years. It's written between 1811 and 1812 in the small town of Teplitz. And he's in Teplitz because he's taking the baths and he's trying to regain his health, trying to get a little bit of serenity, a little bit of peace. The Seventh Symphony is dedicated to Count Moritz von Fries, who was a great patron of Beethoven's. Von Fries was, like so many people in Vienna at this time, Prince Lichnowsky, Prince Lobkowitz, Prince Esterhazy, he was music crazy. He adored music, he adored Beethoven, and spent lavishly on the composer and other composers. He was a member of a Friends of Music organization that helped create concerts. Very dedicated, not just to music, but to other arts as well. Collected books extensively, had a huge art collection. All of this patronage of the arts eventually managed to land him in bankruptcy, which is sad. He died penniless, but so many things he gave us. And we remember Count Moritz von Fries and probably many of his richer fellow princes that we don't think about today because they were not great patrons. Premiere of the symphony, December 8th, 1813, and it was one of the most successful premieres of Beethoven's lifetime. Why is this? Well, this is not so much maybe because of the seventh, but because of the piece that was also performed on that particular evening. Proceeds of the concert were dedicated to support soldiers wounded at the Battle of Hanau. Now, if you are not a Napoleonic scholar, you probably don't remember the Battle of Hanau. Well, this was a battle that Napoleon fought against the Allied forces, which included the Austrians, and Hanau prevented Napoleon from getting back into France and launching the defense of France against the Allied invasion. This would have been in 1813, and sadly, the Austrians did not win the Battle of Hanau, but they had other victories in 1813, which lended a much more optimistic tone to this concert and to life in general. Beethoven said at the concert, "We are moved by nothing but pure patriotism and the joyful sacrifice of our powers for those who have sacrificed so much for us." Remember, Beethoven's relationship with Napoleon was very interesting. At the beginning, he loved Napoleon, but after Napoleon became a despot and after Napoleon invaded Vienna in 1805 and again in 1809, Beethoven didn't have much love for him. And so the idea of doing what is essentially a charity fundraiser for wounded soldiers in a battle against Napoleon must have appealed to him a great deal. Also at the Seventh Symphony was the main event piece, and this was the premiere of one of Beethoven's schlockiest, trashiest pieces, and that would be Wellington's Victory, a battle symphony, which was enormously popular despite being an absolutely horrible piece of music. In fact, one of Beethoven's worst pieces of music that he ever composed. And this is the sort of symphony where you could have guns in it and you would have percussion and maybe a cannon or two, like the 1812 on steroids. But it was hugely popular and much adored by the Viennese. They couldn't get enough of it. And they would even sort of consider the Beethoven Seventh Symphony the coattails piece. It was the B-side of the 45 RPM record, if you can imagine such an ancient reference at this particular point and time. What an incredible cast there was at the premiere of Wellington's Victory and Beethoven's Seventh Symphony. The orchestra was conducted by Beethoven's friend Ignaz Schuppanzig. Schuppanzig was a violinist. He was hugely fat. Beethoven used to tease him about this all the time, very politically incorrect. Schuppanzig and his quartet premiered many of the Beethoven string quartets. It also included some hugely famous musicians of the day. Violinist Ludwig Spohr played in the orchestra 4 Sporen 7 years ago. Playing in the percussion section of Wellington's Victory to simulate all of those battle sounds were Johann Nepomuk Hummel, one of the great pianists in Vienna at the time, and Giacomo Meyerbeer, also an incredibly famous composer, a man who would conquer Paris with his amazing grand operas. Jacob Meyerbeer or Giacomo Meyerbeer. They were both playing percussion. Antonio Salieri was the assistant conductor of the orchestra, I think conducting the percussion section. There was a bassoonist who was very famous apparently in the day, Anton Romberg. I have no idea who he is. And the bass section was dominated by the amazing Italian double bass virtuoso Domenico Dragonetti, who Beethoven described his playing that he played with great fire and expressive power. To top it all off, as a guitarist, most important to me, mes petits amis, is that the great guitar virtuoso Mauro Giuliani played cello in the premiere. How fantastic is that? Beethoven conducted. And I have to say, Beethoven's hearing, people always ask me about Beethoven's hearing. Beethoven's hearing was deteriorating and was probably not completely gone, but mostly gone. And Beethoven as a conductor, I don't think was particularly talented at the best of times. And these were not the best of times. And so Spohr says of Beethoven's conducting, as a sforzando occurred, he tore his arms with great vehemence asunder, and at the entrance of a forte, he jumped in the air. Wouldn't you love to have been there? What an incredible premiere it must have been. This work and Wellington's Victory became super popular. Now, you might ask, was Beethoven the most popular composer in Vienna at this time? No, that would be the Italian Gioacchino Rossini. But this work became incredibly popular, and it was performed no less than 3 times in the 10 weeks following the premiere. That, for the time, is a great deal for a piece of new music. Now, the Viennese were desperate for victories over Napoleon, desperate for good news. And in 1813, they finally get some good news. Wellington is victorious over Napoleon in the Battle of Leipzig. Napoleon loses in the Battle of Vittoria. Those 2 victories were huge, huge, huge things. And this work, performed in December of 1813, was viewed as a great celebration, making up for, once again, the occupation of Vienna in 1805 and in 1809. All you have to do is listen to the review of the Leipzig Allgemeine Musikalische Zeitung, the Leipzig music paper. They said, the applause rose to the point of ecstasy. The new symphony in A major was received with so much applause when it was performed again. The reception was as animated as at the first time. The Andante was encored as at the first time. What an incredible thing, an incredible achievement for Beethoven. The composer and music author Anthony Hopkins, not Anthony Hopkins, the actor, who does play the piano, by the way, quite nicely. He said, the 7th Symphony, perhaps more than any of the others, gives us a feeling of true spontaneity. The notes seem to fly off the page as we are borne along on a flood tide of inspiration and invention. Beethoven himself spoke of it fondly as one of my best works, and who are we to dispute his judgment? That's right, mes petits amis. Who are we to dispute his judgment? Richard Wagner, one of the most disgusting people in history, but one of the greatest composers, he said the following: all tumult, all yearning and storming of the heart become here with blissful insolence of joy, which carries us away with bacchanalian power through the roomy space of nature, through all the streams and seas of life, shouting in glad self-consciousness as we sound throughout the universe the daring strains of this human sphere dance. The symphony is the apotheosis of the dance itself. It is dance in its highest aspect, the loftiest deed of bodily motion incorporated into an ideal mold of tone. And why is this symphony the apotheosis of dance? It's because Beethoven uses rhythms, and sometimes rhythms even without melody. Sometimes we'll just have notes repeated, dum da dum da dum da dum da. In the first movement, he loves that rhythm. In the second movement, yum bum 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 bum. In the third movement, in the slow section, I love this. I mean, fantastic, just absolutely unbelievable use of rhythm. When Beethoven was embarking upon his new path in the heroic period, what does he say to Karl Czarny? I am not satisfied with what I have done so far. From now on, I will take a new path. And part of that new path was to raise rhythm to a more important profile in his music, and not just rhythm associated with melody, but rhythm associated with nothing else, just sheer, beautiful, unadulterated rhythm. But not everybody was happy with this symphony. Not everybody loved it. Friedrich Wieck, a man who you may know as Clara Schumann's father, Robert Schumann's father-in-law, he was at the rehearsals, and he said the consensus among musicians and laymen alike was that Beethoven must have been drunk when he wrote this. Pah! What do you know, Friedrich Wieck? And Thomas Beecham, a man who never lacked for a bon mot, said of our very third movement that you are about to hear performed by the amazing Baltimore Chamber Orchestra, said, what can you do with it? It's like a lot of yaks jumping about. All right, Sir Thomas, we get it. Well, that's enough of me. I invite you, please, to enjoy the fabulous musicians of the Baltimore Symphony and their conductor, Markand Thakar, in the third movement scherzo of Beethoven's 7th Symphony.
Phew. I'm sweating just watching that. So join us for BCO Sundays at 3 on Sunday, December 20th, as we wrap up the Jonathan Palevsky Informances of our reconstructed Beethoven Symphony with the slam bang finale of the Master's Symphony No. 2.